Hello, we start not losing time, the second panel. The second panel will be focused on Europe and Eurozone implications in overall and especially in the Western Balkans, in our region. We have the honor to have the distinguished panelists today. On the panel, we have Mr. Alfred Kammer, Director of the European Department of International and Monetary Fund. Mr. Kammer has had a very extensive experience with the fund for many years. He has been also the Chief of Staff of the Managing Director, has been Deputy Director and Director of many other areas and departments in the International Monetary Fund. And currently, Mr. Kammer is the person and personality that we go and report twice a year in our IMF meetings, yearly and spring meetings. Thank you for being here, Mr. Kammer. Then we have in our panel also Mr. Primoz Dolenc, that currently is acting as the governor of Bankës Slovenia. He has a long experience as a deputy governor, and he will bring his experience as well in Albania, talking about our topics. Mr. Dolenc is also a board member of the European Systemic Risk Board in the General Board. We have in our panel the governor of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Central Bank of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mrs. Jasmina Selimovic. She is also a full professor and dean of the Faculty of Economics in the University of Sarajevo, where she teaches finance, quantitative economics, and actuarial science. Thank you for coming. We have also the governor of the Central Bank of Montenegro, Mrs. Irena Radovic. She has had a great contribution recently in the integration process of the Central Bank of Montenegro, and as well a great contribution in the being member of SEPA for Montenegro. We were also in our process, and she has a great contribution in the integration of entire country Montenegro in the European Union. And last but not least, our speaker in the panel will be Mrs. Deborah Revoltella, she is a director of the Economics Department and Chief Economist at the European Investment Bank, where she leads flagship projects for the European Investment Bank's reports and the EIB investment survey covering more than 12,000 European firms. Thank you for being here. So, not getting longer, I start right away. First, Europe remains an anchor of trade, finance, and institutional development for our region. So basically, we are all countries working towards the European integration. As Mr. Kammer is the head of European Department in the International Monetary Fund, I would be delighted to hear his opinion about the European processes, challenges that the whole Europe is facing, and also related with the Western Balkan integration. Please, Mr. Kammer.
Thank you very much, Ken, for this kind introduction. And first, congratulations to your 100th anniversary. That's a really big and truly important event. And it was crowned, I think, when the Prime Minister said that the Central Bank is the premier institution in Albania, because we need strong institutions to ensure macroeconomic stability, and we all know that macroeconomic stability is the basis, actually, for growth and increasing the incomes of the populations. And independent central banks are so important in order to do that job. So congratulations, Kent, and congratulations to the Central Bank and all of its staff. Let me now go to the topic at hand. When we are right now looking at the global situation, we have been emerging from two major crises. One, overcoming the pandemic, and then, especially for Europe, the energy crisis, which was a result of Russia's war against Ukraine. And we have entered and pretty much completed a recovery phase from these two shocks. And what we see is the global landscape is now fundamentally changing, when you're looking at the US change in trade policy, change in industrial policy, that has global implications, and it also means huge headwinds for Europe. So that's the constellation we are right now in. What is compounding all of these problems is that the medium-term growth outlook, which the IMF has been provided for years, points to dismal growth in Europe. When you're looking at the euro area, we are talking about potential growth as slightly above 1% of GDP, and that's the area which we are entering. And when you're looking at a comparison to the US, in purchasing power terms for Europe, GDP per capita is 30% lower. When you're looking at Albania, Albania's per capita GDP is 35% lower than the European Union average. When you're looking at the reason for this huge difference, you will find that most of it actually accrues to one factor, and that is productivity. And when you're talking about productivity, that's the employment of capital, that's the employment of labor, that's actually the effectiveness of deploying these resources. And what that means is that Europe could do a lot better, and Albania could do a lot better by increasing its productivity. That is money left on the table, and that is living standard which is not accruing the population because of the lack of productivity. And that is also where European reforms are focusing now. When you're looking at European Union reforms, they're focusing on the single market in order to lower intra-European trade barriers, in order to create deeper financial markets and to increase labor mobility, and also to increase a more efficient, less volatile energy market in order to bring productivity up. And that's the focus of European level reforms. Now, when we are looking at another part of the reform effort which needs to be undertaken, that is structural reform at the national level. And they can add quite a boost to the level of GDP. Looking at the Western Balkans, when we looked at the Western Balkan countries and compared their distance to the global frontier, and most of the global frontier is actually headed by European countries, to structural reform areas, we find that they lag far behind on the structural reform sides. And if Western Balkan countries could close this gap by 50%, so half the gap to the best European performing countries on the structural reform efforts, GDP would actually be higher by 9%. And that's a large number. And I think it puts again into perspective what the priorities should be and what should be done. Now, final point I want to make is you care about growth in Europe, because Albania's major trading partners are in Europe, and the spillovers and growth developments in Europe matter for Albania. So we need to get European reforms right, not because just of future accession, but also because it has an impact of Albania right now. And the second point to make is this accession to the European Union is hugely important in terms of making progress on the structural reform area. When we have been looking at experience of last accession countries, most of the structural reforms happen in the run-up to joining the Union, and then they really slow down. And when you're looking at the gains from these structural reforms, when countries are joining the European Union, GDP over the next 50 years will be 30% higher than peers who did not join the European Union. So the effect from these structural reforms made in order to join the European Union And the increased market access, then while being in the European Union, increases the level of GDP by 30% compared to countries who are in the same league and who didn't join. So my appeal is to the Western Balkan countries, to Albania, forge ahead, undertake these reforms, because they will improve living standards and they will improve the convergence process. I should also say, without these reforms, the convergence will just not happen over people's lifetimes. And therefore, there should be a focus. It requires political will. It requires the technical support, which can be lent by strong institutions, independent central banks, but it needs to be done, and we owe it to the population in the region.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Very clear message about structural reforms, productivity, and everything that our countries should do and we are doing. The deadlines for our integration are tight, a few years. Albania specifically is 2030, and basically we have to accelerate the process of structural reforms as we're doing, so it's very challenging. Anyhow, thank you for your clear presentation and clear messages. I go now to Mrs. Revoltella, to Deborah, about the same topic, but with a more focus with Western Balkans related to EU developments, implications, and integration process. Please, Deborah.
Thank you very much, and let me join really congratulating to be such a dynamic and interesting institution, 100-year-old. So a very young and dynamic 100-year-old, and it's really a pleasure to be here celebrating. I think I will link very much to what Alfred was saying. I think we are in a moment of a major structural shift, and it's coming from the geopolitical side, from the technological side, and I think artificial intelligence is posing so much element into the debate in terms of, again, geopolitical transformations, social transformation, and we have also the shift on the financial point of view. This open a lot of challenge and risk of polarization, but also opportunities. And what I would like to show, actually, and I have a few slides, is also looking at what does it mean from the European side and for the region. And for the European side, the challenge is really today how to position in this challenging environment, emerging as an anchor of trust and stability, while at the same time deeply transforming itself, and it's something that is very much in the European policy agenda today, to really exploit the potential in terms of what the European Union really can be as an attracting and anchoring element. And that requires a lot of transformation in terms of European integration and simplification, other than innovation and investment, what we are always talking about. For the region, I think it's very important to have this European anchor to start with. It's something very important and very useful. And again, the domestic transformation, the regional integration, and the integration in the European context, actually they all put enormous opportunity in this moment. The enormous opportunity that goes into creating a better business environment that also can attract more FDI, more growth, and more trust in the local infrastructure and in the local system. So it's something that I believe it's a unique moment for the region and something very important. But again, it comes with Europe on the one side and the region or the other playing together. I have a few slides and I will go through it very quickly, jumping many of them. The first one was actually, actually showing Europe resilience today, but with the big challenge inside Europe on how to be more competitiveness and really working on European structural growth potential, which again has a lot to do with Europe doing much more on exploiting its potential, the internal market, simplification, and further integration and innovation. But the two things that I wanted to focus now is really what is Europe doing in the global challenge at the moment of the big trade reorganization of trades. And I think it's something quite interesting because what is emerging is that Europe is coming very much committed to this concept of, it's a strange word, open strategic autonomy, but in fact what it means is trying to find a compromise where the supply chain in Europe should balance efficiency on the one side with strategic autonomy as a resilience. And I find it extremely important also for the region, and in this US versus China versus finding the compromise. What comes from this, you have more or less to trust me, but the second graph, when we ask European firms how they are adjusting to the trade shocks, there is a big difference what happens in the US and what happens in Europe. In the US, you have a lot of diversification, but also a lot of import substitution. US firms are looking inside, try to substitute and become less engaged in international trade. European firms don't do it. They are very much working on resilience of their supply chain, but remaining open to trade in an effective way. Why is it important? I think it's extremely important for Europe, also future competitiveness, having a resilience and efficiency playing together. And it's important for the region. On the one side, because the region will enter into the supply chain system, and also in a period of transformation, this may also offer opportunity to the region to be part of this system. This is on the one side. On the, oh, no. There is something going to the next slide. Somehow it doesn't, okay. And the next one still. The second challenge is on the artificial intelligence side. As I was saying, there is this new big this new big challenge on how to position in the global artificial intelligence transformation process, where US is leading on the one side, China is growing very, very fast. Europe is trying to position in between in a system where it also tries to get benefit from the artificial intelligence transformation. What I find interesting is looking at the business side. In Europe, we have kind of an opportunity related to the adoption of artificial intelligence and digitalization in the business. Actually, it's coming with European firms adopting quite a lot, being quite effective in this phase. But what is very important is creating an environment that leads to the that is an enabling environment. And here a number of elements are important. The regulatory point of view, the availability of skills, but also the capacity of having the infrastructure capacity behind, and the importance of the transformation of services and also public sector services around the digitalization. Again, why is it so important for the region? Because entering a part and being more involved into the supply chain and making sure that the the digital and artificial intelligence transition gets into the industrial and the service sector, it's important for Europe, and will also have a lot of spillover effect and positive return on the regional point of view. And that's another case in which European integration will actually help, also because of the importance of the regulatory framework in terms of setting the basis for a safe and structured transformation. Going forward, I think these are the two elements, I think, that are quite important in this moment. This open strategic autonomy and how to deal with the artificial intelligence transformation and industrial and service transformation. And for the region, being integrated into the European dimension also plays an important role. There is another slide, it's a bit later, that I wanted to show part of the discussion. Maybe it's okay. I find a way to navigate. I just go to the last one. Okay, this one. And that's very much links to what Alfred was saying. Simplification and integration agenda. Again, it's something a European side, but I think it's very important related to the region as well. If we look at the European level, what are considered to be impediment for firm investment, we always see a number of elements that are constrained: uncertainty, energy cost, availability of skills, but also business regulation and other factors. So the transformation on that point of view is important at European level, but also at the regional level. There is another element that is very much European, but that the region will also face in, and it's the fragmentation of the internal market at the European level. I know Alfred is working a lot also on that, and we are looking at it very much from the European side. The fact that even in the single market, if one company tries to export to another EU country, there are frictions. When we ask firms, 62% of European firms find this kind of a barrier, and it affects firms because they actually profit less, they invest less, so the whole benefit of the single market is affected. Why is it so important for the region? Because we also see that the countries that are the large European countries, the first member of the Union, if you want, they found already ways to deal with this fragmentation. The new member states have more problems in managing it. Maybe it's a matter of dimension or other factors. So on your side, it will mean entering a market that is fragmented, and you want to get all of the benefit of this integration, but the integration has to go on European side in order for the benefit to really be maximized also on your side. So that's another element that I think is very important when we discuss this European homework, if you want, on the one side, and what does it mean for the region on the others. The very last point, and I don't show it, is what we call the Investment and Saving Union or Capital Market Union. We are discussing a lot on how to support, how to finance a more dynamic environment, a more innovative environment. I think it's very clear that bank financing, credit is not the best instrument, but also on the other side, it comes on the household side. Return from bonds probably are not what you want to have in a long-term planning. So you want more of the equity side. And again, I think here the homework at the EU level will be essential for the region coming in. How to have a better integrated equity market, more functioning financial market, really to have this financing that is not only credit-based for the economy, and also return that are not only credit-based for investors. And that's another point quite important. So just to conclude, I think I put a few separate points, but I think the message is Europe has its own work. It's a fantastic catalytic element for the region, and it's really the moment to leverage on it. I think the open strategic autonomy at the European level is extremely important on the region, in the sense that a closed trade Europe would not bring the same advantage, also in terms of efficiency. The element of artificial intelligence transformation, and there European regulation plays an important role. It's an area where people talk a lot about deregulation. I think it's very risky, because actually it's very important to have a very well-regulated artificial intelligence, and that's where entering into a region that has a stronger regulatory point of view, I think it's also crucial. And then the two things on the simplification, integration, and investment and saving union as important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's quite clear that the European Union is our anchor for all the countries of Western Balkans, and the presentation gave clear insights about figures and developments. I would like now to pass the wording to the governors. Two are of the region, but Slovenia as well is a step forward. Let's start with Primoz first. What is your view in this context about the process of the integration and whatever you can say? In addition, and then we go with Yasmin and Irena that are more relevant with the Western Balkans. But let's start with Mr. Dolans first.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations for the university. Anniversary, it's 100 years compared to 30 years of Bank of Slovenia. It's quite a nice thing to celebrate. So thank you again. Well, it's hard to add something to what has been said already. Maybe I will just use different words, in fact. We are talking about strategic choices, right? So in recent years reminded us how things can turn around quickly. Pandemics, Ukraine war, geopolitical tensions, even natural disasters, at least in Slovenia, and lately swift change in international trade order changed dramatically how we as central banks and those who care about economic policy focus on our mandate, on our job, on what is the focus of economic policy. Not to mention, this was not mentioned too many times today, tight labor market. So in Europe, not more than 5 years ago, the focus was clearly on ESG, fiscal consolidation, and similar topics, whereas today we talk about defense spending, we talk about derogation from fiscal rules, and so on and so on. So the focus might be totally different. So while we face headwinds from tariffs, trade policy, uncertainty, and broader economic risks, we still need to find the right balance in the structure of GDP in order to sustain economic standards for the long term. And here I will speak about our region, Europe, European Union, more or less. So what has been said already before, Alfred mentioned that Europe is struggling from sluggish economic growth structurally, which undermines our competitiveness and finally also our living standard. So what I see is that comparably to some more propulsive big economies, we have a problem of lack of integration in many areas still. Then we suffer from a fragmented financial system still, and we have comparably low investments and innovation. So this is what Alfred already mentioned, is something that's very important. And when we are facing with strategic choices, we need to focus on, at least in Europe, on inclusive and competitive innovation ecosystem. We need to think about how we will finance investments and which investments are there to boost economic activity. And Deborah already mentioned savings and investment union. I think that this is really an important thing. We know that in Europe, we rely mostly on banking sector, so we are bank-focused economy, which cannot serve for young, innovative, high-tech companies to get all the financing needs they need. So banks are not there to finance small economies. Small firms, and this is what we do need in Europe to have let's say, higher economic growth to catch up and so on and so on. And we do see that also in Slovenia, being small open economy, we are catching up economy. I think our GDP per capita is around 90% of European, so EU average. If we want to catch up European average, and I'm not saying that we need to catch up European average, we want to be better than that, it's evident that we need to attract innovative companies, wise entrepreneurs. We need to support them with different kinds of options, financing, also taxation and otherwise. But then we have in Europe quite an evident problem with tight labor market, which is a structural problem. So for Slovenia, for example, our economic growth relied until great financial crisis on capital intensity, on productivity growth, but from then on, we relied on labor markets, so on increase in labor. But this obviously will stop not only in Slovenia, but also elsewhere. So we need to think about how to increase productivity, how to increase innovation, how to increase investments. And here, all the measures that the European Union is doing on integrating capital markets, then how to channel a lot of funds that we have into productive use is really important.
Thank you very much, Primoz. Let's continue with other colleagues, with Yasmina and Irena, about our region perspective regarding to the topic. Please, Yasmina.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here on this very important occasion, and I would like to use the opportunity to congratulate the whole team on the Bank of Albania for the huge centennial, and to wish you to exist and successfully operate for at least another couple of hundreds of years. So I believe it is hard to agree more with everything what was previously said. I will, from the small accession country, I will refer to what Alfred was mentioning, that we need to have very strong and very stable institutions and independent central banks, of course, but very stable and strong institutions. I believe this is the disease that we all in the region suffer from. And this is something why we are paying a huge price of not being members of EU, and actually some countries such as Bosnia and Herzegovina not even starting the negotiation process. As Deborah was mentioning, the Europe, no matter everything what is going on in the world and in European Union, is definitely serving as a symbol of trust and stability. And this is something that is really out of the question, even in the future. It was, for a quite long period, Europe is a role model for this region. Europe is showing us how to modernize the institution, how to force the economic growth, how to maintain financial stability. And actually for Bosnia and Herzegovina, this is not only the matter of strategic orientation. We are trying to present that through our monetary arrangement, through our financial system, throughout the reform agenda that we just recently adopted, which is within the European Commission for the final adoption these days. And I believe no matter everything what is going on, geopolitical tensions, disruption of supply chains, it is, again, out of any question that the Europe will continue to serve as the anchor of growth, as the anchor of financial stability, and a role model for all the countries. There are different ways how the Europe is showing that throughout the institution, the credibility of the institutions, and I believe this is the homework for all of us. This is something that all countries which are in accession phase should learn from developed countries, from European Union countries. For the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the central bank is operating under the currency board arrangement for quite a long period of time, for 27 years, 28 actually. And we are trying to maintain that system as a signal of credibility, as a system of predictability, because this is something that was imported from the Europe in that time when the central bank was created, and definitely we showed in these 28 years of huge uncertainties that a system like that can work. If we didn't have a receipt like this imported from developed countries, it's a huge question what would have happened with the currency within Bosnia and Herzegovina. The second thing that I would like to emphasize is the just recent exercise with SEPA. So actually, deeper integration of our payment and financial systems within the EU framework is definitely sine qua non for the future. I believe all countries in the region, with Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, no matter we didn't finish our homework on time, unfortunately, but let's hope for the best in the near future. This exercise actually is showing very clearly the pathway and all the benefits that we are importing to the region thanks to good practices that Europe has for us. And there is something else that maybe should be emphasized, is that this is what we are talking here about are mainly economic terms, but rule of law, institutional integrity, this is something more than just the economic environment what Europe can offer to us. And I believe it's of the utmost importance for all of us to recognize that and to use that as more as possible and as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Yasmina. This is very clear, absolutely. We are in the same basket, all our countries. I would like to pass the word to Ms. Radovic, to Irena. Albania and Montenegro are similar in our path towards the EU integration, even though that Montenegro is some step forward us, and we're cooperating in many aspects. So please, Irena, we would like to hear your opinion on this process, please.
Thank you very much, Genti, and I would just, first of all, like to use this opportunity to congratulate 100 years anniversary and say how pleased I'm here. And I would like to say that I have to note that all regional central banks are here represented at the level of governor, which is a testament to the excellent cooperation that we all have with the Bank of Albania, and fantastic footprint and contribution that Gent Seiko and his excellent team at the Bank of Albania have been continuously giving and leading when it comes to regional and overall frameworks. So congratulations once again. I'm pleased to be here, but I'm very pleased also that we have the opportunity to discuss topics which are relevant and which are going to make us more resilient on both sides. I always try, when I talk about the Western Balkans and when we talk about our economies, from the perspective of somebody who is representing a country which has been the longest negotiating country in this room, definitely. And from the perspective of somebody who has been involved since 2007 in drafting the Stabilization and Association Agreement with the European Union. I was in the team negotiating our annex on usage of the euro, which is again a lovely story where Germany at the time, who is still sponsoring Montenegro's EU path, saved the economy and the country from atrocities of the wars raging in former Yugoslavia by offering us economic stability and lending us our own, well, their own currency, the D-Mark. So basically from 2007 to today, things have been changing in waves. In 2007, Montenegro was convinced that we would join together with Croatia, which did so in 2013. But that was already a turbulent period when appetite for enlargement was vanishing, when complexities within the EU, which still exist today, were debated and debatable, when the same kind of rhetoric where Deborah said we still need to reform on our side and we still need to counter the fragmentation and integrate on the side of the European Union so that you can reap benefits, etc., etc. And in turn, we had Berlin process whereby Germany led the efforts to try to lead to the high level of integration, primarily economic integration in the region, so that we can actually become a better candidate for joining. Because let me remind you, we are talking about small, fragmented economies of only 18 million people. And when we look at today, and when we look at what all my predecessors have flagged out as issues of importance or topics that merit attention, I can say that from Alfred to Deborah, Yasmina, Primoz, we were all highlighting sound and efficient institutions, which is number one. Strength of institutions and the rule of law is number one precondition for economic growth and economic development. We were talking about structural reforms, about productivity, about artificial intelligence, about savings and investments union, about strategic autonomy of the European Union. Yes, but at the same time, we were talking about what can be done and what are the best vehicles to speed up the process and to, well, make Europe greater than it is today. When I say greater than it is today, I'm not trying to replicate a motto on this other side of the Atlantic, but I'm just trying to say that as a European, I find it hard to witness the political and economic decay which we have witnessed over the past 2 decades. And I really believe that we need to find strength as European economies and European nations to make a bit of a sacrifice and sacrifice national priorities and national pride and invest in Europe. And the best way to invest is to reform, to speed things up, to regulate, but probably regulate in a different manner. When I say regulate in a different manner, I'm talking about comparing, although now the comparison is not the best, but even during the democratic administration in the States, on average 3,000 laws passed in 1 year are counted by 13,500 laws passed, pieces of legislation passed in the European Union. So the level of administration and the level of regulation, intensity of regulation, complexity of decision-making, all the elements which have not been addressed for a very long time are still impediments to consolidation within the EU and making sure that the boundaries, the neighborhood, and the future EU is also consolidating. I believe that initiatives that are currently underway and strong focus on innovation is very important. But then again, it is not simply technological innovation and technology per se. It is more making sure that we have functional systems and functional institutions. It is only when we have functionality and stability within the system, stable macro framework, sound public finance, independent monetary authorities, strong regulatory framework and stable business environment that our economies can actually grow and that the EU can actually strengthen. And in this regard, I can just say that in Montenegro, given the fact that we are a country that has been negotiating or will be negotiating over 15 years by the time it gets to the point to see the ratification of the Treaty on Accession, which we all hope will be in January 27, we have implemented reforms. We are moving against moving targets or running against moving targets. But what I can say with pride is that over the past 2 years, I can vouch that Central Bank of Montenegro is the leader of change in the Montenegrin society. When I say leader of change, I'm saying that in addition to delivering 2 years ahead of deadlines on regulatory framework alignment and on all initiatives, including SEPA, which Kent mentioned, we started filling the gaps in other segments of other institutions. So when it comes to AML CFT, we fill in the gap of the Ministry of Interior and other institutions. And again, we are one of the strongest delivering central banks in terms of AML CFT enforcement on the continent, in terms of multi-million fines exercised and in terms of integrity in financial sector today compared to 2 years ago when we had a different label. So again, strong focus on innovation. I have to say that the Central Bank of Montenegro, which, as you know, is a central bank without seigniorage, so our revenue stream based on payments and banking fees supervision and asset management is rather modest, but whatever we have, and 30% of our profitability, we are pushing towards the innovation and technological progress. And we are partnering with the National Fund for Innovation and National Technological Park. And over the past years, we managed to introduce robotics in all elementary schools in Montenegro, and we used the financial literacy vehicle to introduce robotics in all elementary schools. And before I came to Albania, we had a competition of 255 teams across Montenegro, and I'm very happy that this project that we've been implementing for the past 18 months has actually brought us European and Olympic champions between the age of 5 and 12. Again, we are working a lot in terms of having frequent hackathons on a variety of subjects. Currently, we're working on financial inclusion of populations with disability. And also, we opened programs for training, vocational training and education in terms of fintechs, propping fintech, because Central Bank of Montenegro is the leader and the author of the national fintech strategy. So basically, what I can see and what I can say also after this experience of 2 years and after, the struggle of 2 years to preserve the central bank independence and to appoint vice governors in line with the law from the ranks of central banking, because these people are the people who will be sitting in the, as of next year already, as of January, in the ECB General Council, and very soon in status of observer in SSM, in SRB, in all the bodies. So it is very important to make sure that meritocracy, that the institutional capacity is brought to the fore, and that one insists on quality rather than on any kind of concession to any kind of structure which would try to bring it into question. So in the end, I would like to say that what I perceive as very positive and something where I see that strategic autonomy argument is being built very successfully and rather courageously, is the implementation of SEPA and TIPS in the region, modernization of payment structures, and inclusion in European financial ecosystem. Yasmina mentioned that Kosovo, we are waiting for Kosovo, Bosnia, and Serbia to join in terms of transactions. I have to say that I can only say chapeau to both of my colleagues who have done their homework in an excellent fashion, and already a year and a half ago, both of them. But again, it comes to the political structures and to how fast the parliament is and how unified the political structures are. But ultimately, what matters is that with this initiative, only my country, and I believe that the situation is similar in other countries of the region, is going to increase GDP per capita and close the income gap with the European Union by 11 percentage points. I'm saying 11 because at the very beginning, Alfred was talking about countries who joined the European Union improving their convergence with the EU by 30 percentage points. Well, we have an example in the room, Slovenia. We also have Estonia, who went from 30 to 90 plus. So we have examples of over 60 percentage points. And I have to say that with these reforms, we are really winning and making sure that economic convergence takes place at a faster pace, much ahead of EU accession. But at the same time, the EU is also anchoring itself in the region, which over a long period of time was left to different geopolitical forces, and at the same time enlarging the single European market from 540 million today to, once Ukraine is also included, 600 million, which is also a great thing for EU prosperity and the overall future of our continent. And I think I will cut it here, not to make my argument too long.
Thank you very much, Irena. We are sharing same and very similar challenges and progresses as countries with Montenegro, but also with Bosnia and Herzegovina. From your presentations, it's quite clear that we really need to have strong and independent institutions, first of all, as Central Bank is one of these institutions, and we're trying, not only in Albania, but in all our countries in the Western Balkans, to raise the quality and the standard and professionalism. Independence is not isolation, as it was also presented by the managing director of the IMF, but it's also accountability, professionalism, and transparency towards the public, and we're trying hardly to do. Of course, in the process of the integration, all the institutions of the country has to be professional, with integrity, and cooperating with each other, independent as well. Independence is a key factor, but independence should be associated with professionalism and integrity. Otherwise, we'll have troubles, and the process of integration will not be as fast as we want as a country. So basically, this is a key and a very crucial factor. And of course, productivity, as it was presented, is a key, another crucial point that we all as a country have to be increasing. And definitely everything goes through structural reforms, and all our countries are struggling and working hard in the structural reforms towards the EU integration, that we are in the process. Now, in this context, in the second stage of your wording and speaking to the audience, I would like to raise some questions, and then you can all discuss about these questions, whatever you see that it is relevant and important from your point of view. I mean, first is, how can countries design institutional and policy framework that foster innovation-driven growth while mitigating social and economic disruption? The number two question is, what specific policies can Europe and its member states adopt to create a competitive and inclusive innovation ecosystem? And the third is that how can Europe continue to serve as a broader anchor of financial stability and innovation in the region? So basically, based on the questions are related to our country, again, towards the integration process in the Eurozone, innovation, modernization of our systems, and everything you could see. I start with Mr. Kammer first, and we go in line with all the speakers. Please, Mr. Kammer.
Maybe first to pick up on strong institutions, Yasmina, Irena, rule of law. When we studied structural reforms for the Western Balkan regions, and as I said, closing the gap to the best performance in Europe would increase GDP by over 9%. half of that comes from changes in governance. And I think that's important, and that's the foundation for growth. That's also the foundation for macroeconomic stability. Second point to make, private sector dynamism. What does the private sector need? The private sector needs a stable environment so that you have the conditions for investment. When you're looking at what is missing in the region right now, it is investment, it is capital stock, that's something that needs to be built up. And third, what we also need is labor. And labor is an issue in the Western Balkan regions because people have been emigrating to the European Union. Real wages are higher, so there's a logic behind all of that. So what to do about this? And that is also important for this ecosystem of being a private company which is successful in the Western Balkans. Rule of law, having access to capital to have investment, and having the labor. And I think on the last point, Western Balkan countries need to just do more. Because labor and labor productivity starts with strong education, especially in the STEM system. And if that is not prioritized as an issue, labor will also not be available for the Western Balkan regions. That requires active labor market policies in order to help labor go to the right places in countries. So I think that's an important point to make. And when it comes to structural reforms, it's all difficult. And the politics of this is always difficult. And so what does one need to do as a politician and as a policymakers? First, be very clear about setting out the strategy and what you want to achieve. And I think Albania is doing a good job there in terms of saying we want to increase per capita GDP over the next decades by so much. Then identify the policies which you need to get there. Communicate those. Create that narrative with the population so the population knows what all of these structural reforms are actually about and what the end game of all of this is. Third, bundle and sequence. Be smart about implementing these structural reforms. And we have fantastic examples in Europe how to do that well. Because if you are doing something on labor market flexibility, you want to combine it with active labor market policies. You don't want to create unemployment in the process. And final point, in all of that, we need very good communication. And it's key to have the population understanding and with you. Otherwise, the amount of structural reforms which need to be undertaken in the end will create reform fatigue, and not much is going to happen. And the region cannot afford that because the region has the aspiration to increase the per capita incomes of the population. The population deserves the chance to be there, and that's why we need a concerted effort in terms of how we structure the reform effort and how we communicate the reform effort. But bottom line is, it's going to rely on the private sector and private sector dynamism. Public enterprises are not dynamic. Public enterprises are not bringing us to where you want to be in terms of the living standard. But for these private sector enterprises to work, create that productivity and create that income for the real sector, they need this enabling environment. And that's where policymakers have to come in.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Please, Ramos, your opinion.
Yeah, I will be short because Alfred said it all. I might add something from economic, from the point of view of European Union. As I said before, even though the economic activity in European Union is, of course, way higher compared to Western Balkans and so on, We do see that we lack of dynamism as well. We have some disadvantages in economic growth and so on and so on. So we need to address this issue also in European Union, not only in this region. So in terms of total factor productivity, we have reached the limit in terms of increasing economic growth via increase of workers, because there's a lack of workers in Europe as a whole. So we need to think about technological change, innovation, and things like that. So there are a couple of things we need to push forward in Europe. The first thing is we need to talk about tax and other regulatory regimes. So we still in Europe have 27 different regimes. So there's a lot to talk about 28. Then we have already mentioned a question of financing. So are small, innovative, fast-growing companies able to get capital? Then we have fragmentation still present in Europe. So there are a lot of things to address. Of course, there are a lot of recommendations on the table. For example, Draghi report last year, he mentioned a lot of things we might do. During the last couple of years, a lot of ideas were there on the table. But if we counted these ideas and what has been achieved or implemented, we estimate that only about 10% of all the recommendations that would be needed to be implemented were actually implemented. So we need to have a political will. There is obviously a political will nowadays, so we need to go forward with investment, with financial literacy, which was mentioned, with savings and investment union, and this is all concentrated in our thinking of how we will catch up economies that are better in the things that I mentioned already before.
Thank you very much, Primoz. We pass it to Yasmina, please.
So I believe when we talk about innovation, it's very important just to think beyond only the technical innovation, what Irena was mentioning. Sustainable growth and innovation seem to be the buzzwords these days, especially after the Nobel Prize in Economics laureates were announced in this year. However, if we talk about this outside of the professional audience, we might hear that as more innovation we have, so perpetual innovation will give us the sustainable growth immediately. So according to the wider audience, that would be the receipt for success. However, we can see evidently that when we have the new products, when we send them to the market, they start jeopardizing the old companies. So in a way, we have some sort of conflict that we need to address in a constructive manner. What is very important to think, I believe along the lines we need to think about the countries, and countries have two options. One option for the country is to be creator of innovation on a technical frontier, and the other one is just to rely on some spillover effect. There is a huge number of factors that we need to consider in this sense, but actually the baseline for the region would be that in research and development our budgets are less than 1%. In European Union, if the country is a member of European Union, it does not necessarily implies different, unfortunately. In that case, country has no other option than to rely on a spillover effect, to take over something and then to rely on that, not to go after their own innovation. There are several things that we need to consider as well. The first one, which is important, is if the higher economic growth is going to directly imply the higher living standards. In our region, we know that we have aging population, we have large inequality, large informality, a huge fragmentation among the firms and industries. And in a situation like that, we are not contributing to higher productivity. So actually, in this sense, we need to be, we are also considering having the companies and actually the industries that experienced high productivity, higher than average productivities recently, such as finance, such as wholesale, resale, IT. And on the other side, for example, utilities did not have the same experience. So the policymakers in the region definitely should make the tiny balance between the growth rate and real average disposable income raise in the short period. The one very important thing to consider is also the infrastructure ability to absorb the innovations. I believe if policymakers would need to accept only one measure for the future, that would be to strengthen the infrastructure to be able to absorb all the innovations that are produced somewhere else or within the country. Because at the moment, our infrastructure does not have the capacity like that. Let's focus only on the electricity grids, for example. We have the surplus of the electricity, which is produced from the renewables, and our electricity grids cannot accept it. So what to do with that? So actually, we need to think much beyond the box that we are currently working on. And of course, the communication between the three main pillars of the innovation ecosystem is not a good one. In developed countries, we have almost perfect communication between the industry, between the government and academia. And in the region, the situation is not like that. We need to focus on education, of course, because this is, that can help to unlock the full potential, the innovation potential of Europe. And we need to be careful about the signals which are currently in place. We are aware that we have an additional request from the other side of the ocean to EU funds, which actually result of the President Trump's misbehave for the universities. So this is something that can affect us as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't more than agree with you in some points that you raised. For example, in terms of innovation, we are all running and trying to implement, and we as regions has done a lot of progress, especially in the modernization of the payment systems compared to where we were and where we are. It's a huge progress, not only because we are in SEPA now and all the region, even the other countries are close to being in SEPA, but in many aspects in terms of digitalization, using cards, financial inclusion of the banking sector and financial sector is showing huge progress in all our countries. But in some extent, what you raised is that we should go towards innovation parallelly with investment in the infrastructure. For example, if we don't have internet in the rural areas, we cannot progress with the innovation. We have to provide the infrastructure and then follow up. So it's quite a complex process that we are working, but we have to work being coordinated with all elements and specifically with the infrastructure development. However, there is progress, there is huge progress, and if we look back where we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's unbelievable. We were economy of cash, at least in Albania, and now, I mean, more than 70% of population is being banked, has a bank account, and is benefiting a lot of benefits from the banking products. I mean, it's uncomparable. But still, there is a long way to go to reach the European standards, of course. Thank you, Yasmina. Let's go to Irena.
Thank you, Gent. I can, well, definitely subscribe to everything that both Yasmina and yourself have said. And what I can say is from the perspective of, again, an accession country which currently stands at 52% of the GDP per capita in comparison with the EU. I can just say that as a small economy which has a gap to fill when it comes to capacities and lack of resources, we have no other way to go than to make sure that we innovate and that we use all the capacities and all the possibilities that are before us to close the gap. And what I can say is that already in 2008, or since 2008, we are part of all EU frameworks on science and innovation. And given the progress that Montenegro made in a very short period of time, we closed the chapter on science, technology, and innovation already in 2012. We were the first non-EU country to develop smart specialization strategy, and we are currently in the third iteration of implementation. But what I can also say is that despite all this effort, exactly due to the challenges which we've identified, and one which was highly stressed by Deborah in terms of financing, in terms of, risk-sharing initiatives, capital venture, making sure that we can prop up startups which are exactly in the domain of R&D. I'm not sure that we're still doing enough, and Montenegro is currently on the dashboard of European innovators. It's the most advanced accession country, but we're still at the level of 50% of innovation in the EU. And once again, I believe that, as Alfred pointed out, we really need to make sure to strengthen the private sector, to make sure to open up and support, as, again, public institutions, because it is only when public institutions innovate and when public institutions create the framework, the regulatory, the overall framework for innovation, that private sector will have confidence to follow. Otherwise, it will leave, as it had been the case with Europe over the past decades. Now, this is the case with Montenegro today. Most of our startups, fintechs, are moving to Estonia when it comes to the EU or the US, and this is something that we need to redress. And as Alfred also said, what is important is to not only make sure that we have sound and accountable institutions, but also to improve communication and dissemination of information. From my experience over the past 7-8 years, when I was not only in central banking, but also in development banking, the European Investment Bank is having fantastic programs, is doing a lot on digital and green transition, but then again, the level of compatibility and capacity of local authorities, when I say local authorities, I'm talking about Western Balkan 6, to deliver, is quite limited. And here we have a gap where private sector is very keen, where the banks and central bank are very keen, but at the same time that the pace at which administration sometimes goes, I'm talking about overall administration, including parliament, is not as quick. So what I would do if I could is definitely make sure that Brussels and member states use the frameworks which we already have in place. But I'm talking about European investment strategy and also the new growth plan for the Western Balkans, to make sure that when you have financial packages which are attributed to each country, that the delivery is unconditionally there, so that we can actually go ahead, because sometimes there is a little something which is missing in the system, which prevents you from innovating, from greening the system, from digitizing, and this is exactly what is the situation across the economies of the Western Balkans. And when I said before that sometimes the central bank in Montenegro takes on certain areas which are definitely not within its mandate, several weeks ago I proposed to my authorities to take over the e-services, so that I can make sure that I have, so that we can make sure that there is a spillover across the administration. And with the TIPS clone project, which we decided to fund via loan from the World Bank, I have the scope within the project to include the development of e-services in Montenegro. And if we have a look at all our economies, in every piece of administration, everywhere, you still use stamps and you still have paperwork going from one office to another, even if the distance is 2 meters. So this is something that needs to be addressed, and it's very difficult to talk about innovation at a sort of a more developed stage if you're quite rudimentary in terms of digitalization, which is currently the case with the economies of the Western Balkans. Another thing which is relevant and can be used as a very strong point of leverage is partnering with those who know us best and who have been our trusted advisors when nobody else was there. And here I'm talking about the IMF and the World Bank. I believe that, again, the need for expertise and the need for assistance, because now some of our economies are actually crossing the decades of underdevelopment in a year or two to make sure that we are ready for EU accession. You really need to work on building capacities, and I believe that fantastic initiatives such as the CTAC, the Southeast Europe Center of the IMF, which is supposed to support governments and central banks to make sure that we have a sound macroeconomic framework and that we actually can invest in and implement structural reforms, is something of utmost importance. And this is also an area which is very relevant to make sure that the society can progress, that innovation can take place, and that economic convergence and economic growth are there at the pace at which we wish it to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irena. I share the same opinion with you regarding to the technical assistance, especially our institution as central banks has had a great progress, and we are growing and become very much professional compared to times before, but still in the European process of integration, we definitely need technical assistance from international institutions, IMF, World Bank, EU, especially for the legislation compliance, but even further for many aspects that we're not going to list it now, but you all know. We still need technical assistance. This is very important for our institutions. Thank you very much for your presentation. I go to Deborah now.
Thank you. And I think I very much follow what has already been said. There is a little more to add, but I try to come more on a few elements. I think for the region, the best way to really have more innovation, more transformation, and to benefit from European integration is to actually have a business environment that is effective and conducive to innovation and transformation. And that's the best way, really, to have the upside from the integration into the single market. And I make a couple of examples. On the labor market, I fully agree with Alfred. Education is extremely important. Investing on the STEM is extremely important. But I also reconnect to what you all said about building an environment that is based on meritocracy and really trust of institution and environment. If you have a lot of outward migration and sometime you want people to come back, they need to find an environment where your high skill, what you learn, etc., is valued and appreciated. If you queue for a job that maybe you were not in the queue in the first 20 years, it's really difficult to get back. So a lot of countries that had immigration in the past find out that actually having a business environment that is flexible, but also where meritocracy is there, it's very important also to have this flow of people maybe coming back at a certain point and having this element. And I think it's really, really important. The other aspect, also on the labor side and on the innovation side, the integration with the EU. Actually, at this point in time, at the European level, there is a hope that actually the fact that Europe is a beacon of stability and trust and values actually is paying back, because a lot of people are coming back to Europe. A lot of scientists are looking, it's more anecdotal, but it's happening. So actually that will be something where also the region, by integrating more, will benefit. There is another point that is important that was mentioned at that point. We are in a period in which everywhere in the world industrial policy are back big time. How you do industrial policy, it will be extremely important also in the region. What we see is that for industrial policy to really be better defined, it takes two things to be, and European level, we say, be designed at the European level and be targeted. Why European level design? Because we want an effective single market. And whenever you have national policies are not well coordinated, etc., you have protectionism coming back one way or the other. So you really want the European integration, and you really want that industrial policy, when it's there, doesn't distort the market. And that's very important also for the region. And that targeted really makes the difference. We see also in our own instrument as an institution supporting countries that when instruments are targeted, they really deliver much more in terms of impact on the final objective that you are trying to develop. So I think how you use as a country industrial policy will also be extremely important. And then the last thing, infrastructure, but also I very much subscribed to the capacity development, technical assistance. I think the effectiveness of the public sector makes a huge difference also in terms of how effective your industrial policies are. A better business environment means the impact of what you do is much higher in terms of growth sectors, innovation activities, etc. So all brings back to have a good business environment, effective, trustable, and with a lot of meritocracy. I think it's the other point that I find out. So everything goes back. I think we can summarize all the points: trust of institution, meritocracy, etc. Everything is part of the same system for the region to benefit more from the European integration.
Thank you very much. I believe we went around the questions and a lot of very precious thoughts from all the panelists. We are a bit running out of time. We can have a couple of questions, just a couple of questions, if there is anybody interested to raise a question. If there are no questions, we can go for lunch then. I thank you very much for all your wording and your speeches. Thank you.